Again. Welcome to another installment of the Show Will Go On Business Survival Series webinars. I am, of course, your host, Tom Stimson. This is episode 7. And it's like the road goes on forever, but where's the party? You can find me at all of these places. Please come visit on Facebook. Check out the AV Matters Facebook group. We've got a nice dialogue going on there. Please ask to join so Wallace or I can let you in and share your questions there and continue some of the dialogue you're having in the Zoom webinar chat, which is, scrolling up just out of my peripheral view here, but I see it going on over there. So thanks for everybody for playing in that space. Let us know where you're from. Have a little chat going on some of the ideas there. Awesome. I love it. I love it. A couple of shout outs here. Of course, Avixa is doing a heck of a job supporting live events. They are extending this webinar series through the June 3rd show, so we'll continue to do this. I've got more topics and plenty of content to work through to help us get our businesses retooled and rebooted for the new normal. And I guess what I'm saying now is the next normal. All normal is new, it's just the next normal. So sign up, get your free membership at Avixa, and they have a free training available until June 12th. They also have the Business Survival Exchange, which is a Friday discussion group specifically on today's webinar. So, hey, sign up for that, get involved in that. You can meet your peers online. They're great at managing the Zoom environment and doing Zoom breakouts. All skills you need to learn for the short term at any rate. A couple updates from me. The Owners Group coaching program that we've filled the first group. It is starting next week. I have half the applicants ready to fill the second group, and we're taking more applicants. So we're rolling people into each successive group. I've also started a general managers group per your request. We've got folks registering for that already, but please go visit this page, see if it's right for you. Click on the apply button, answer a short email about the state of your business and your commitment to join the group. Nobody gets billed from this page. Once the group is formed, we'll come back to you. You get to review the terms and conditions for the group agreement, and make your final decision before you send the payment in, or I move you into a different group. So by all means, it's time to look at this stuff. I will run out of capacity on groups, so get going. I'm still giving away free help. If you haven't taken a 15-minute phone call with me to talk about your business, help me understand what you're at. If you just want somebody to listen to you, I'm happy to do this. If you want to test out some of your new ideas and get some feedback on how they might work in your marketplace, I'm there. I love that stuff. So bring it on. I love talking to you. I have talked with folks all over the world. It's pretty awesome. So please continue to schedule those calls. And there's the link for the webinar recording. Grab your phone, bookmark that page. We'll add everything to it. And then, oh yeah, the AV Matters Facebook group. Go visit there, discuss anything you want to discuss. There's a very minimal rules there, but we are talking about the business of AV. So by all means, get in there and chat with your folks. And here we go. All right, let's get into this week's content. I want to make plenty of time for questions. There's always more questions than I have time to answer. Some updates. Yeah, so here's my statement. Quarantine as it pertains to the hospitality and live event segments is expected to last for another month or more, which is not the same as saying we're going to be back in business in a month. In addition, we should expect a resurgence of cases from all the openings that we're going to see cascading across the country. I'm in a state that's going to have some openings starting on this Friday. Some municipalities have really opened up their environments to much more socializing. It doesn't meet the science, so be aware of that. I don't think any of this is particularly a setback for us, because our opening is still many months down the road. Once there's been plenty of testing, once we can isolate hotspots, and of course, once there's a vaccine, but that's going to be another year from now. But in the shorter term, when we have some isolation, some regional control over things, some better protocols about how we can meet in person, we will get to have some meetings again, but they're going to change. And that's the whole point of us having these conversations. We need to start to figure out how we're going to influence how those meetings change. So I strongly encourage you to avoid the mindset that about getting back to work, because that implies a normalcy. Getting back to work is not going to be normal for us at all. What we need is to get on with work. It's evolving. It's not going to be the same, but it will be work. It's going to be hard work. It's going to be new work. There's going to be new challenges, but it's going to happen. So what have we learned over the past week? So the government, the U.S. government's PPP program, the CARES program, is designed to funnel subsidies to workers through your business. And many of you have told me that you're only participating because it's a way to help your workers. You're trying to meet the spirit of the act, which is you're going to pass some money through your business. There's also another program in SBA called the EIDL program, which is another source of loans for things that aren't tied to the payroll and the rent that the PPP Act is tied to. So if you need a general business loan and you don't feel like you can get it through your bank at reasonable terms and reasonable time, the SBA program should be something that you looked at. I've talked with many owners here recently who have gotten both a PPP loan and the EIDL loans, and their plan is to have their business cash flowed for a year. Okay, that's what they're striving for. They need to know where the money to run their business is going to come from for the next year, because they figure that's how long it's going to take their business to get fully functional again and starting moving forward on a more normal basis, albeit with better scalability, better efficiency, better margins. Now, what else do we know this week? 2019 revenue. All indications that I'm seeing from the other groups I'm participating in, podcasts and interviews that I'm listening to from people in the hospitality industry and people who do events, I think it's optimistic if we see 25% of 2019 revenue in Q4 of this year. So if you did $1 million of revenue in Q4 of last year, there's a potential of doing $250,000. Now, that's really in the aggregate for all of us. You know, your individual results are going to vary by the mix of the business that you have, the types of events that you normally do. But there are going to be events this fall, late fall. To what scale and which ones, we don't really know yet. But all that business that's on your books for Q4, not all of it is going to happen, in my opinion, but you will have some of it. So let's plan accordingly. In 2021, we will start to see some return on business, particularly in the second half of the year. I'm hoping that we have the protocols in place for meeting by the beginning of the year, and we have learned all of our lessons through the trial meetings in the fall. Your 2021 revenues will probably only get to 50% of 2019, and most of it's going to come in the second half of the year. The end of 2022, you should hopefully, if everything keeps going as we hope, or expect, actually as we expect, we hope for better, 2022 should start to look more like your 2018 or 2019 revenue. We'll get back to that. So we ought to be able to look to all of this in the past. So if you're trying to gauge your social calendar and figure out when you're going to buy that second vacation home and, you know, that new boat and all that thing that we enjoy, okay, not really. But if that's what you're looking forward to, we've got some time to plan for those things. Listening to all these conversations, I'm also predicting a fair amount of hotel failures in the smaller hotel chains who are not going to be able to fund. You know, there's a real estate bubble that's been around since there's a commercial real estate bubble that's been around since the 2008 banking crisis, which was a residential real estate bubble. Not a lot of people are talking about what's happening in the commercial real estate world, but I think that's the next domino to fall that's going to feed the longer recession that we're probably moving into. So having said all of that, I'm still very optimistic about our ability to survive and thrive in this environment, but do yourself a favor. Minimize your overhead any way you can. Outsource as much direct labor as you can possibly outsource. In other words, use part-time workers and then send them home when you're done. We've got to keep our overhead low. We've got to do this for the long haul. We're going to have to change our business models to do that. That's a little bit about what I'm going to talk. Well, that's basically what I'm going to talk about today when we talk about operations. Quick recap from last week. We talked a little bit about marketing, just to get your head back into the business space. You add value to something. That's what you do for a living. You add value. How much value you add is determined by a number of factors. Having capacity, having brand value, being able to deliver incredible outcomes, or being uniquely special are all things that affect the value of your price. You can make any price that you want, but that price may or may not be valuable to the customer without leveraging one of these four things or all of these four things to some degree. Now, your price point, your flexibility, your expertise, and your ability to immerse yourself in your customer's business affect the value of your relationship with your customer. So we have the value of our price and the value of our relationship. And if we can reach the pinnacles of both of those, then we have a very customer-focused business that is in a position to make very, very good margins from a very, very loyal clientele. There's nothing wrong with any point on this curve. You can be a price-driven, capacity-focused business and kill it, okay? But understand where you fit and where your customers need you to be. We talked about the 12 steps of customer experience and how all of these things fit together, starting from the target customer, taking you all the way to the closing. In this process, you're going to reveal what you do for people and who you do it for. Who you do it for is vitally important for you right now because your target customer is evolving. The individuals may be changing, but the nature of their business and their needs is definitely evolving. You want to connect those perfect buyers, those target buyers, with the products and services that they need, that you have developed, and affirm a mutually beneficial deal. That's how every transaction works. It can happen in a handshake or an elbow bump, right? Or it can be drawn out over months or even years to get there. But this is the process and all the steps that we all use. And then we talked a little bit about negotiation. I introduced for some of you, new for some of you, customer buying styles that I teach. And effective negotiation leverages your scope, need, and buying style to achieve the optimum price and margin. So these are all very important things to understand. So go back and review that if you missed those things. I'm going to share a couple of recap questions, and then we're going to dive into my favorite topic, which is operations. Recap. So I've never had a customer that was okay with just an end line price. Everybody always asks for breakdowns. And if we are saying that we should sell value, how would you recommend that we refuse to give our customers the breakdown and then convince them to look at the total value instead? All right, so a couple of issues with it's an honest question. I get it. I understand where this person is coming from. This is not black and white. And we don't refuse our customers anything, but we do understand why they're asking. So the closer you are to product transactions, availability and price, that pure play rental counter transaction, the more detail you need. Okay? However, your customers are asking for detail that helps them budget. So take a look at the type of transaction and provide the appropriate detail for them. Do they need to know the number of microphones and what each microphone is worth so they can add one or take one away? Or do they need to know that if their audience size increases, that's going to affect their budget? So take a look at that, and that's the information that we need to provide in the chunks we want them to be able to understand and manipulate. If you'll do that, you might find that you're missing an opportunity to turn your product into a service, because even a rental transaction can be an effective service if presented correctly. Another question, similar question, but more nuance to it. Is there a threshold where gear to labor ratio, we talked about how much of your order is gear and how much of it is labor. Is there a threshold where the gear to labor ratio on a job will look odd to the customer? For example, a $2,000 concert with $1,250 of labor and $750 of gear. Will this type of bill look too strange? And I said, yeah, the answer is yes. If you're used to presenting it your way, where it's $1,500 worth of gear and $500 of underpriced labor, yeah, it's going to look really strange to that particular type of customer. What I'm suggesting is, because this is a package service and the line items are not what's important, what you're doing and what's non-negotiable is presented as a package. You have for instance, a festival package, concert PA, band monitor system, up to 40 inputs, 10 mixes, delivered, set up, operated, $2,000. Here's an option to add 8 drops of wireless. Okay, band riders are additional. This replaces those 30 or 40 line items, that 3-page proposal that you had before. Will it work for everyone? No. Okay, but it will work for the type of people that you're trying to sell to, and it doesn't force you into the situation of, well, change this line, or can you reduce each individual price, and have you negotiating nuances, which is the whole point of all this. Be a service, not a rental shop, if you're trying to negotiate from a single scope of work. All right. Just remind everybody, questions in the Q&A box, chat away in the Zoom webinar chat, but I can't get to that while I'm presenting, but I will be monitoring the questions in there. I'm going to put a couple questions in here that I'm going to answer here in a little bit, and you ought to be able to see. I'm learning how all of this works, by the way, so you ought to be able to see that in the Q&A. You'll see what I'm getting to later. All right, operations. Okay. For those of you who are new to me, you probably you've picked up by now that I'm kind of an operations guy. I'm really an operations person at heart because I love process. I love what it takes to get something done. I spend a lot of time on the selling side and the marketing side because that's where all of our business comes from, and that's part of being a consultant. But back in the day, when I was a W-2 guy and worked in a company just like yours, I came in as the operations and process person. And so that's where I really like to go back to. That's what I really love. And often in my clients, that's where we have the most impact, because what we do in operations, I was saying, operations supports whatever sales can sell. But I also have a corollary to that, which is sales sells what operations can support. And if we can get these two groups in sync, there's no stopping you on how to grow your business. However, as our industry has evolved in the almost 40 years that I've been in it, and then I've been watching it, we've picked up some really bad habits and we've amplified some bad habits. We've come by it rightly because our mentors told us to do this. They told us this was important, but they didn't understand all the ramifications that we're seeing now. Okay? This is what I call the event production death spiral. Okay? Look at this circle. I'm going to start up here with the bench shrinks. Okay? That's where we're going to start, but it doesn't matter where you start. Okay? You end up going around and around and around, and things get worse and worse. So the bench shrinking, if you tell me we don't hire freelancers because we don't have a well-developed freelance market, and we just shrug our shoulders and move on, then what we end up doing is having our technicians come into the shop to prep shows. And when they do that, they like to send extra gear because you can't do a show without it. And, oh, by the way, they leave the shop a mess. Some poor warehouse manager who's working by himself until he has to make an emergency delivery. Now there's no availability because we can't find the gear because it's not back on the shelf because it hasn't been properly checked and or QC'd, which means salespeople freak out and they don't sell things. So they think we're too busy to do another show, which makes your cash flow poor. And then you start to sell on price because you're trying to make up lost ground. And then suddenly when you sell on price, everybody is billable because you're trying to recover all these overhead costs for all these technicians you have on staff. And when you do that, you don't hire a freelancer and your bench shrinks even more. And we go back around again. Okay, this is the death spiral. Okay, you sell on price, your margins shrink, it forces you to sell on price more. Your situation gets worse and worse and worse. It makes each one of these negative points even more negative because everything becomes more and more urgent. When I talk about scalability, this is the opposite of scalability. This is the unscalable model that we have developed ourselves We didn't copy any other industry to do this. I haven't found another industry that works and thinks the way that we do. We've done this to ourselves. We can fix it ourselves. Okay? Scalability is what we're trying to get to, and scalability is the secret to growth and profit. Okay? In order to be scalable, you have to know three things extremely well. You got to live them, breathe them. You have to know your customer, you have to know what your costs are, and you have to know what your capacity is. Okay? If you know these things and some of the sub things that go along with this that I'll talk about, we can unleash a lot of business. We can sell beyond what we think our capacity is. We can make money in places we didn't think we could make money before. There's so many things that we can do, but we have to master these. Now, let's take each one of these and break them down a little bit. Knowing your customers. Knowing your customers is not, oh, I know what they are, or who they think, or where they are. That's not what I'm talking about. Knowing your customers, you have to know what your pipeline is. You need to be able to look at the jobs that you've quoted and be really good at forecasting. You need to know what conversations actually turn into money versus turn into wishes and pipe dreams that salespeople often will grasp hold of, saying, we're going to win this, when there's nothing behind that except their hope that they're going to win it. We have to understand our customers so we can understand our pipeline. You have to be flexible. Okay, knowing your customers are not static. They don't ask for the same things all the time. We have to be able to think on our feet. We have to answer their questions. We have to provide them capabilities. So we have to be extremely flexible in our presenting our capabilities to our customers. And the third thing is that we have to kit and systemize things. Right now, too many of you sell from a bottomless pit of customized services that we will configure to whatever need that you want, which means you don't understand your customers. Because if you understood your customers, you could design the products and services, you could systemize them, you could kit them, you could package them in a way that makes it easy for you to sell, to budget it and sell it, and for them to buy it. And we have to master these three things. Now, to master knowing our costs, you've got to do some things that you're just going to hate. But this is good business. Number one is PO compliance. Right now, if one of your employees went out and made a credit card purchase for an event that's going to happen in the fall and didn't issue a PO, didn't get approval for it, and all of a sudden, sometime in June, you get a credit card statement with this huge bill on it, and you go to the salesperson or the project manager and say, Tom, what were you thinking? Oh, well, we do this show every year. I thought I'd go ahead and buy this. Okay? That's not knowing your costs. Okay? PO compliance is absolutely critical. Your guys are struggling with cash flow. I'm struggling with cash flow. We need to know what every obligation we possibly have is. And purchase orders are the way to record the promises we make to suppliers so we can put it into our cash flow projections. One thing that helps with PO compliance is central purchasing. And for many of you, if you were 50 employees and now you're down to 5, well, you have just centralized purchasing because probably only one of you is really good at that. So if we can have one person or one group of people that do most of your buying, one, you're going to negotiate better, you're going to make fewer mistakes, and you're going to have a record of what things cost, which tells you how to put margin, how much margin you can put on something, or how to price things. And the third thing knowing your costs requires is dynamic outsourcing, which we're going to talk a little bit more about, of course, today. You need to know where to find more stuff and when to find it. Okay? When you're busy is also when everybody else is busy, which means you need to be really good at outsourcing and predicting outsourcing needs, making deals far in advance. You're like an airline buying fuel for 3 years from now, right? Dynamic outsourcing, being able to raise and lower your outsourcing based on the availability of your current resources and knowing what everything costs is absolutely critical to this formula. Capacity. Oh my goodness. In order to know your capacity, you have to know what you're going to run out of, which means you need scheduling. So doing scheduling and forecasting, which is a byproduct of scheduling, is very, very important. Most of you will run out of people before you run out of gear, but when you're trying to watch pennies, you might pay more attention to the equipment because your return on outsourced equipment is not as good on your return on outsourced people. And keeping people full time is much more expensive than outsourcing. So scheduling becomes very important in your capacity. It tells us what we're going to run out of. Budgeting, not just budgeting the orders that you're writing, but the fiscal budgeting. It's very difficult to do your cash flow statements without having a fiscal budget and knowing what your costs are going to be every month and how your variable costs will change depending on how much revenue that you have. Okay, so your budgeting skills become important. So one of your 5 people better be good at budgeting. And then of course, staffing. Staffing is, I mean, I have a staffing background. My first company was a staffing company. I developed a huge freelance pool for the organization I used to work for, where we literally could have 100 freelancers on the road traveling in named positions for clients. Staffing is critical for your business, and we all need to get better at it, because you need to be hiring outside staff dynamically on a need basis, but you also have to do it far enough in advance. You've got to pay well enough to get the good people, which means you got to know how to charge for it. You have to know all of these things. So know your customers, know your costs, know your capacity, all the elements underneath that. That's a lot of stuff to grasp, because that's a macro view of running your business from an operations standpoint. But where are we right now? We're in the middle of a pandemic. We don't have any business. Tom, that's all good and fine, but I haven't had to hire a freelancer or subwrite anything in a month, and I'm not expecting to for another 3 or 4 months. All right, I get it. Let's talk about what we need to be doing to retool our business to get ready for growth again, get ready for business again. So here are some of the things that need to change in the way that we do business, so that coming out of the pandemic, as business starts to come back, that we have lower costs, which means we can have more effective pricing, more competitive pricing when we need it, and still make decent margins, that we will have more capacity available. Well, one, because we're not going to have the demand to meet our 2019 capacity, but you need more capacity than that, because we're all going to get busy at the exact same time. People who master capacity first and best are going to have an advantage over everyone else. So this is an operations guy speaking. Here's some things that need to change. Number one, no more of this, we're going to get around to it. How many of you have told me over the past 6, 7 weeks, 8 weeks, that you're going to take advantage of your downtime to reorganize the warehouse, do your inventory, maybe clean some stuff up, move the shelves? Good. The list of things that you're telling me are all things that you should have done already. You were waiting for downtime, which was never going to come, but now it's forced upon you, and all of a sudden these things are important. Get them done. After this is over, they're never unimportant again. Always get them done. Okay? You are trading, you're kicking the can down the road by trading capacity for things that are vital. Now, either it's vital or it isn't. If it's not important, don't do it. It's a waste of time, it's a waste of money. Okay, it's a would be nice. Okay? But we can't be putting things off that we're going to get around to later. Get it done. All jobs or projects have a clearly defined end. Okay? We need to close things out. Okay? No project piles, no bin of cable that needs to be repaired, or a stack of equipment that needs to be QC'd or fixed, or God forbid, a pile of equipment that needs to be checked in. At the end of every day, everything should be clear. That's the type of operation you should be running. Okay? No project piles. What we're looking for is getting you to a zero state. And most of you, your zero state is kind of a mess. We got everything checked in, and we're going to come back tomorrow and finishing everything else. That's not a zero state. That's I ran out of time. Okay? We need to quit running out of time to do these things. If you will keep up with the things that take time, these projects, so that we don't have to push them off till that fictional downtime that we never actually have. We're going to get more work done. Okay, we're going to be more efficient in everything that we do. So zero state means that we're going to have the shortest path to equip to a prepped and de-prepped state on every job. And I'll talk more about that in a second. And then, of course, open floor space. I've been talking about this for a couple of years now. I'm getting pretty militant about it. Open floor space is one of the most indispensable tools that you have in your operation. And as an operations person, you should be protecting it with every fiber of your being. And however much space you have, you probably need twice as much, maybe 4 times as much. We grossly underestimate how much open floor space we need to efficiently and effectively turn our business. And if we commit to that open floor space, we will make all the decisions that we need to make about getting rid of all that crap, all that junk, all that stuff you're storing because you don't have the heart to get rid of it. Okay? Keep your floor clear, protect it at all costs, okay? And you will find that you're going to be much, much more productive. Now, what am I talking about here? I'm going to talk about 3 different models. First of all is the old reactive model, one over here for you. The old reactive model is the one that we inherited. I've looked at this model for years. Most of my new clients have some variation of this. When I come in and start working with them, you got techs in the warehouse prepping your shows. I hear, yeah, pack your own parachute. It reduces our mistakes. No, it doesn't. You have concepts like show pay to make up for the fact that you have expensive techs doing inexpensive warehouse work. So you pay them a shop rate and you pay them another rate when they're on show site. Whenever I hear show pay, besides all the hair on the back of my neck standing up, because I don't have any on my head, I'm going, okay, I got a problem here. Okay, you've got a reactive business model and you haven't done the things to make your business franchisable. You treat everything as custom, and the only way to solve a custom show pull are experts. So we've got to get out of this, we need techs to prep our shows. You only need techs to prep your shows is because you haven't codified how to prep shows. So that's the reactive business. We react to the business, we throw the talent at it, everything is customized, everything is different. We reinvent the wheel every time, and then we prep the exact same show we prepped last week, but we call it something different. Now, I've been moving a lot of my folks into a scalable model, okay? Now I'm calling this the old scalable model, and we'll talk about the next normal model. The old scalable model was introducing full-time warehouse staff. Having people who pull and prep shows for a living, who do QC for a living. These are not people who aspire to be techs. They don't want to be techs. They want to do a good job of prepping orders. You move many of your techs to a part-time role, and they can be full-time. They can do full-time work, but they are on a directed basis. Now, in the old scalable model, we had self-directed projects where the warehouse crew said, hey, we're done prepping shows. Now we're going to work on the shelf project, or we're going to work on the labeling project. And the warehouse manager says, hey, you 2 guys work on the labeling. Hey, you 2 prep the show, and you 2, if you'll work on the cable. And then they go back to their desk and look at orders. Okay? That is the old scalable model. It will increase the capacity of your business significantly from the reactive model, but it's not where we need to go. Okay? The new normal, the next normal that we're going to see are part-time everything, okay? On-demand everything. I have full-time supervisors, full-time managers, but I run a 24/7 business. You're open 7 days a week. How do you staff for that? Okay? You staff dynamically. You bring people in when you need people. You bring in capacity when you need capacity. But scalable was about creating capacity and making sure we're there in case something happens. In the new normal, what we're going to create is readiness. So there's no self-directed work. Everybody comes in to work on something specific. Imagine setting up a show. We're all show people, right? And you open up the doors of the truck and you turn to the crew and say, okay, everybody do whatever they want, but we need to get the show set up by 5. Okay? Everybody gravitates to what they want to do, right? People who like to unload trucks will unload trucks. People who like to put scaffolding, we'll build scaffolding. Okay, we're not going to get done efficiently, and we can't run a warehouse operation that way either. Everything needs to be directed. We need to have supervisors who are engaged, who have people making good use of their time. That's not the same thing as breathing down their neck. It's making sure that we're completing a task so we can do another task. We need to use the time allotted, okay? So in other words, we're not going to let it carry over till tomorrow. We're going to get it done today. It's amazing to me that we can go into an arena, unload 4 tractor trailers, and set up a giant show in one day, but we can't clean up our warehouse without having it carry over till tomorrow and the day after and the day after and the day after. So that same mentality that makes us successful at doing shows where we actually have deadlines for getting things done, we need to apply that to our internal operation. So I'm either making friends or enemies right now, but I'm just telling you the truth, guys. This is where we need to go. So part of readiness is, at the end of the day, I have all my kits and systems are in a 0 state. You're going to need to create a lot of grab and go kits. This is going to be very important to your new business as you're coming out of the pandemic, and you'll find that your orders are smaller, they're a little bit different. You need to be able to grab and go a system very, very, very quickly and do it accurately, which means you just build a kit. Okay? That kit has the same thing in it every single time, and you have as many of those kits as you could possibly need. Now you're ready. Okay? You can pull 4 or 5 cases, and the order's out the door, and off you go. Okay? If you do that, you will send more spares because they're going to be built into the kit. That's going to reduce your, oh, by the way, runs back to the shop, which are hugely expensive for you. You're going to have this massive open space for prepping and QCing things, but it's empty at the end of the day except for the order that's completely pulled and delivers in the morning, unless it's already on the truck and ready to go. Protect that open space. And then sales can now build things from kits, so we can reduce the amount of customization. If you feel, and I know many of you feel that you're a custom company and that's the value you bring to the marketplace, listen to me. There's really no such thing as custom. You're taking a lot of standardized parts and pieces and you're putting it together in new and different ways. So you're no different from a restaurant chef who's taking ingredients and making a dinner. What I'm suggesting is that you offer your clients a menu, so there's a reasonable chance that dinner, if 2 clients are asking for steak, that the steak dinners look appropriately the same. So there's obviously variations on that, but quit thinking that everything's custom. Give salespeople the tool to sell customized variations, because the client's problem is what's custom. Our response doesn't have to be custom to a customized need. Does that make sense? Okay. Learn these 2 words. It's included. My other 2 favorite words are up to. It's up to 8 mics, up to 8 mixes, up to 16 feet. Okay. And when the client says, well, what about this? Just say it's included. You'd be amazed at how far they hear that 5 times, they're going to quit asking. Now let's get into day-to-day operations. All right. For some of you, I mean, if you were a less than $2 million company before, you'd be thrilled to have 1 order a day right now. So if you have a 1 order day, that's not bringing a whole crew in for 8 hours. That's bringing in the crew that's going to deliver and set up the order to prep the order. Now, is this techs in the warehouse? Yeah, technically it is, but I'm filling the call. We're starting in a 0 state and we're ending in a 0 state, and then everybody goes home. If there's no orders tomorrow, nobody's coming back, and they don't have to because the shop is ready. Any crew can come in now and prep the next show, next order. So they come in and prep, they do the delivery, and I don't care if the delivery is at 8 a.m. Come in at 5 a.m. I mean, many of you would love it right now if you had a 5 a.m. call. Come in at 5 a.m., you're done by 1 o'clock. That's the nature of our business. Work the hours that we need. Don't string things out over 2 days if you can do it into 1. Now, as you become more busy, or if you're 0 state, or if your restart numbers are going to be higher, if you're doing 10 orders a day, then you're probably going to have a dedicated QC prep team that comes in on that day. Okay? And they're going to be getting the orders ready. You're going to have a dedicated driver. So if you were a 60, 75 person company before, and you're coming back to doing 10 small rental orders or small to medium orders a day, then you need a delivery driver. You might have a second driver at some point in time, but all of that's outsourceable and all of it's plannable. You have a dedicated QC and prep team, and your techs who are part-time and scheduled and directed to go to job sites go straight to the job site. Okay? Your lead could just be the driver. Okay? Certainly on strikes, I like them to be that person. They do the job, they finish the job, they tear it down, they QC on show site, and instead of making tear outs go as fast as possible, make them take longer. Okay? Get the work done, get everything back in place, and then everyone who's still on the clock, if you've got a strike crew coming in for a 4-hour minimum for what's going to be a 90-minute strike, put them back in the car, drive them back to the shop, unload that truck, finish the QC, put everything on the shelf. You're in zero state. Now you go home. It's a very different way of thinking. This is exactly how you would have done it as a startup if you were a OCD like me and you want everything neat and tidy. But this will give you a highly efficient business where you don't have to have the same people prepping every single day and have a lot of people waiting in potentia of work happening. Now, many of you have had full-time techs. You are scared to death that you've had to let these techs go, furlough them, or lay them off. Other people are going to grab them. Trust me, they don't have any more business than you do. It's going to be very hard to find work for all the full-time techs that are now out in that market, but that's okay. What we need is a more robust freelance market, and for better or worse, we're going to get it. It is better for your business from a scalability standpoint. Not everybody is cut out to be a freelancer, so it's going to be worse for them. But you're going to take care of them. You're going to do new programs. So if you have a full-time warehouse crew, if you're covering 7 days a week with your warehouse crew, like I was talking about in the in the 10 order a day model, okay, that's requirement number one to hire a full-time tech. You have to have that primary delivery driver. Okay, that's a full-time position before you hire a tech. You have to have technicians that are consistently averaging 20 days per month of billable tech work. That's not, oh, we put them on the setup crew or they came in and did some, no. They're out on jobs in front of a client and being paid to be a tech 20 days a month average. Now you can hire a tech. In theory, you should probably have 4 people out there doing 20 days a month, and that means it's time to hire 1. Okay, maybe 2. Okay. Here's my formula. When a full-time tech reduces a freelance payroll by twice the staff rate for that technician, okay, then it's time to hire them. If I can pay a tech $40,000 a year in wages and I have 20 days average per month of work for them throughout the year, and they replace $80,000 in freelance bookings, that's a win-win formula. Okay. In my old business, it was probably 3 times freelance bookings or tech wages. So I would have waited till it was 120,000 worth of tech bookings before I added another staff tech. Find your formula is my point. Scaling up. So your business is going to grow again. We're going to go from probably what we all will consider dregs, so we're going to look at those orders very fondly right now. I had talking to an owner this morning who said, yeah, man, he was really upset because they lost a $1,200 gig. I've never seen him upset for anything less than 6 figures before. So it's like, yeah, all of a sudden those jobs are really, really important. But as business comes back, okay, what you're looking to add is not necessarily workers, because you can outsource and part-time workers. You can share workers with your comrades, your compatriots. You used to call them competitors, but right now you guys need each other. You're going to share some of that workforce. You already do. So when you grow, what you're going to be adding is supervisor capacity. That's who you need staff for. People who know your systems and processes, your brand, your etiquettes, to make sure that your supervised work is done to your standards. That's who you need to hire. Okay? You will start probably looking at teams, and you might have some tech teams and shop teams, and you might rotate them. Okay, if you're a small business and you're really hands-on, you really feel that you can't get away with that from that custom feel that you need a technician to prep an order, then do a rotation. Have two teams that work well together. This week, these guys are doing shows. That means that this crew's in there working in the shop. You'll never get away from the need for outsourcing, though. Okay. You will get more and more dedicated roles, but don't give up the direct supervision. Okay. You may have a person who's a repair tech. Don't just say, hey, come in and find stuff to repair. Okay? Repair techs should always be working on the things that are highest priority for you. And we should always be working to completion. And I want to get to the point where I send the tech home. Okay? I want the work done. I want it all complete so that I don't have to work overtime, because we're always trying to get back to that zero state. And remember that custom work is a customized use of standard elements. Sell the perception of customization. It's the client's concept. It shouldn't be your concept. So many of you are now in the US, or in the 8-week period where your payroll is subsidized by the government. And as soon as you got your PPP loan, the clock started ticking. You needed to bring back all the people that could come back, and you need to be using that PPP money and accounting for it, all those payroll expenses that will offset that loan, which will become a grant. Now, many of you said, well, we're going to come back and get some projects done. I'm going to challenge you to be really laser focused on what those projects are. These big sweeping broad, we're going to work on flex, or we're going to do inventory, that's not good enough. Okay. Here are some things. This is what it might start to look like, and you can get into more and more detail. I want to be able to tell my operations manager what they're going to focus on if I'm the owner of the business or their manager. I want them to want to have a very optimized makeover work schedule. We're going to spend 8 weeks. I want to know exactly what we're going to get done and when we're going to get it done and what resources I need to provide. During that time, I want to reclassify how I classify workers. I want to change how I classify workers. Okay? I want a level 1, 2, and 3 skill set so that I can look at any individual and say, are they qualified for QC 1, 2, or 3, Prep 1, 2, and 3, Tech 1, 2, and 3, or all of those things, because I need to know where they fit in to the work schedule and how I can use them, where I can apply them. I'm going to apply that to every part-timer I have on my team, every freelancer that I work, so that I know where I can plug people in, because you need to hire folks on a short-term basis to finish the work that needs to be done with proper supervision. You have systems that are budgetable from a sales standpoint. Let's standardize them quickly. Quit talking about it. Put some parts and pieces together. Say, this is what's in this package. Try it out. If it doesn't work, fix it. Okay? Quit waiting for it to be perfect. Implement it now. You're going to fix it when you prep the show. I know you will. You're going to scrub the order. You're going to find the mistakes that you made, or the things that you left out, or the stuff you put too much in, then go back and fix it again. Quit having meetings about it. Get it done. Run some pull, prep, and return trial runs. You're going to do this for training. You're going to do this for proof of concept to get people used to the new categorization. You're going to change where you store things in the warehouse so it takes fewer steps to get things done. You're going to make sure that everything that's on the floor is on wheels. Everything that is waist high to head high can be picked up with 2 hands. Everything above that is forked on a pallet. Okay? And you have aisles big enough to get the work done. Okay? Set up a proper warehouse. I don't care how tight you think your warehouse is. Half of what's in there is junk. You probably need to throw it out anyway. Have this plan, because I want all the project supplies delivered and ready so that we don't delay starting a project. Okay? Those supplies are going to show up in my prep area, which is sacred ground. I want them to show up just in time that we complete one project and move on to the next. I don't care if it's painting, cleaning cases, refoaming. Now, I've got a list of warehouse stuff, and your list is going to be 10 times longer than this. Okay? Put down all the things that you need to do to get to zero state, and do them in order. Do not start cleaning gear and cases until you've thrown out all the gear and cases that don't need to be cleaned. Don't think you're going to do them both at the same time. Okay? I like nothing better than a good dumpster party. I'm the king of throwing things out. Learn how to throw things out. If it's inventoried, we have to decommission it. Get really good and fast at it. Okay? So figure out what your list is, get through all those things. Wow. See, I told you I liked operations. Okay, so I'm going to pause for some questions. I see some coming in. Finish typing up your questions. We will take a Q&A break, but I'm going to come back to that in a second. Let me get my announcements out of the way. Next week, we're going to talk about next normal from a strategic standpoint. We're going to talk about strategy. We talked a little bit about it a few weeks ago. You know, businesses, we're going to have to talk about strategy. We have to talk about marketing and sales. We have to talk about operations. We talk about finance and management issues. And then we're going to talk about those things again, so that I want you to get deeper and deeper into what your business needs to look like. So next week, we're going to get past, you know, all meetings are streaming meetings, back into what the next normal is, where streaming meetings are a part of our life, but they're not the prime focus of our lives. Again, with announces, again, the Reboot Coaching is active. I have the general managers link on there for you want to join a general managers group. We're forming our second group of owners. And if we have enough folks, we'll form a third group, so keep coming. But do register if you want to get in on the next group. I recommend that you register by this Friday. Click the Apply Now link. That's all you got to do. We'll get money from you later. Don't worry about the money yet. Remember, this includes private one-on-one sessions with me every month to help you keep you accountable, keep your business going. I'm still doing the free calls. If you haven't had yours, please schedule one. AVIXA's Business Survival Exchange is on Friday. We're going to talk about today's event. So the 400 of you that are here today, please sign up and with AVIXA, and y'all get together and discuss about just how crazy that guy Tom is and how in the world does he think any of this is going to work for us. The webinar recording is here. I typically have it up within an hour or two after this event is over, so you should be able to get to the archived video of this event there. Share it with whoever you need to share it with within your company, friends, colleagues, your grandmother, whoever you think might want to watch it, that's fine with me. All right, I'm going to take some questions. My final thought, if demand is down, and right now, whose demand isn't, why are you holding on to obsolete inventory? Right now in your warehouse, it's tons of stuff that was obsolete 6 months ago. Some of it was obsolete 6 years ago. Just get rid of it. This is the time to do it. All right, let's take a few questions here. Let's see. So I'm going to scan the questions real quick and pick some stuff that we can answer. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to answer it. So we'll talk about markup on labor. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about the pricing for labor and margins for labor. The markup on labor is commensurate with the risk of labor. For stagehand labor, what I call no name, no blame labor, my markup on that is typically going to be 2 to 1. If I'm paying $30 an hour, I should probably be charging 60. As I become more and more technical, the ratio might increase, but it won't always work that way. Sometimes the talent you need to buy is at or close to market rate, and all you can charge is market rate. But market rate is higher than what many of you think. I'm still seeing people charging $500 or $600 a day for highly skilled engineering switching, main 10 A1 positions, when the freelance market rate is higher than that. And those rates won't drop that dramatically coming into the next normal. A good freelancer is in demand, and they're going to be in even more demand coming out of this because you're going to have less staff. Another question here. Do you have any info or thoughts about Main Street Lending Program as another loan source, seeing as PPP and EIDL running out of money? No, I don't really have any thoughts on that. I think there will be more PPP money, and I don't even know what the funding is on EIDL. I think the general political mindset of the U.S. is that they need to put more money in here because most states cannot borrow in deficit. They can't spend more than they take in. Only the U.S. government can, so the U.S. government's probably going to do more of that. Other countries, I'm hearing similar types of programs and similar type of languages, but there's a lot of stuff. Um, what about the economy? Yeah, I don't. That's not really a question. What about it? It's not awesome, and I think it's going to get worse. We haven't had time to fall into a recession yet. We're doing very recessionary things, um, but we're not there yet. Let's see. Regarding packaging, what about labor? We work on day rates with overtime after 10 hours. In addition, this is how freelancers work. You can lose margin very quickly. Right. Yeah, you're still you can package labor, but that doesn't mean that you can't charge for changes in scope. So, the standard practice, and this is not new. We've been doing this for a long time. Is there are industry accepted practices about charging overtime after 10, penalties for missing meals, late hours, bad turnaround times, all that kind of stuff. These are fairly standard. You can standardize all of that in a protocol sheet as an addendum to a proposal. You don't even have to put it in your terms and conditions to do that. So you still have to charge for that. For me, it's a change of scope. Okay, here's the price for this schedule. Now, if I'm quoting a schedule that includes a fair amount of overtime, I better have overtime in the budget. I might even break out for the client so that they understand, here are your base charges for labor. Here are all the charges for labor that you're going to incur, or we expect to incur because of the schedule that you forced us into. And here's how you could reduce that if you want to do that. So you don't have to line item the labor, say, here's this position, they're $800 a day, which means they're $160 or $120 overtime. You would simply say, for all these labor positions, your run rate on overtime is X per hour. For this set of crew, and overtime for this crew is X per hour. And just do that by way of a footnote. Certainly a verbal explanation would be appropriate as well. How will all the newly laid off techs and the lack of work impact our ability to get labor? Will those people change careers, depleting the labor pool? Many of those people are going to change careers. It's not going to deplete the labor pool. I think your labor pool is actually going to get much larger. For the people who want to stay in this industry, that's a good option for them. I think your staffing companies and your staffing providers are going to be valuable partners in this scenario, and that they need to be able to provide you access to qualified labor and people that you don't know. Because if you only work with the people that you do know, that means you have to do a full-time job of finding new people, and that's going to be hard to do with a smaller staff of supervisors who are busy supervising the workers you have in the field. So I think we're going to have a plethora of qualified talent. I think it's going to be a little bit of a buyer's market for a while until it sorts itself out. I think some of that labor pool will get tired of being freelance labor. It won't meet their lifestyle, their needs, or their temperament. There are other people who thrive in that environment, in which case I think we're going to have a much more professional labor pool. And this is not new, guys. We're most of us, and all of us in the corporate AV world, this is how we've been doing theater events, entertainment events for centuries, decades at the very least. So the model is very well developed, and there's huge amounts of our live event world and the clientele that I deal with where 100% of the technical labor is freelance. So we will learn how everybody else already does it, but the point is that we got to learn. Next question. Yeah, because of the change in client needs temporarily, we're probably 5 times the size we need to service current projects. All of the cost of a larger company, except for scaling labor, remains in place. Any amazing ideas? I'm sure there are others like us. Yeah, so there are a lot of companies out there who have some physical overhead that is very hard to retract on. The amount of building space you have, your rent or your leases, your loans and things like that, which don't really scale with your business. So the mandate is get your overhead down in any way possible. Now, for everything that you mentioned, or that I mentioned, things like rent, it's all negotiable. Right now, many are negotiating. They see the handwriting on the wall. They know that there's going to be an excess of available space, and they have a tenant who's willing to pay them, but pay them a little bit less. I think we're going to see a lot of leases renegotiated. You have a lot of larger companies tend to become a little bit top heavy. I work with a lot of businesses that have been around for 20, 30, 40 years, and they have employees that have been there for 20 years. You probably have a lot of sentimental expense that you need to take a hard look at. So there's no amazing ideas other than knowing that you're going to have to use every skill in your management and owner playbook to get those things down. You're going to have to make some very hard, uncomfortable choices, and you may have to buy your way out of some of those things. I was working with an owner yesterday who's got his PPP loan, is now getting an EIDL loan because he's going to use that money, one, so that he doesn't have to hit his bank line of credit, so he still has that money available. He's going to use the EIDL money to try and reduce some of his other costs by paying things forward, buying in advance, that sort of thing. So yeah, getting overhead down is management's job, particularly at the C level. We have teams, we have people who will manage our costs of goods sold and our direct costs, but as management and owners, we're the only ones that can control overhead. We're going to have to make those hard choices. So that wasn't an amazing solution, but it's just a reminder, it's our job. If you need help, I'm available. Let's chat. Let's see. I see some people saying they're committed to floor space. Yay, thank you. How do we avoid underpricing our services just to generate revenue once we see business starting to come back? I saw this in the last recession. I saw it too, and production companies would take advantage of the scenario. So right now, it's going to be a little tough. Right now, any customer that wants to shop is going to do very well. Know your customers. Some of your customers shouldn't be your customer. If they're just there to price shop, do everything you can to be at the end of the list so that you don't have to drop your price. You only have to match it. But there's going to be a lot of price shopping, particularly on streaming events. If you're just doing a simple stream, there is no price point on this. It's whatever people are willing to accept. So you're going to be beating each other up a little bit. Decide where you want to play. We'll talk more about this in strategy next week. Decide where you want to play, draw a line in the sand, work to get more opportunities. If you want one opportunity at a fair price, then you need 4 people asking you to do the work. All right? You got a 4-to-1, that's a 25% close rate. That's what you need to protect your pricing margins in a buyer's market. You need 4 buyers for every one thing that you do, and hope that you can create the value proposition. Remember the 2 axes that I showed you last week and talked about earlier. You need to leverage those 2 things. Not every buyer is going to be your buyer. So you need more buyers to increase the odds that you're getting the buyer that you need. So it's a great question, complicated answer, but great question. Let's see, when talking about floor space, do you mean the physical literally or mentally figurative? No, I mean physically literal. I'm an ops guy. We're literal. We don't speak figurative. I want a space that's the size of 4 semis in my warehouse if I load 1 semi a day. That's what I'm talking about. We need a lot of open floor space to do our work. Now, what's the first thing you do when you get to a ballroom? All right. Unless you're lucky enough that the hotel actually read the hotel letter and gave you an empty ballroom with the 8 tables and 20 chairs set in the middle so you don't have to move them. You walk into a ballroom and the first thing you do, you just have to start moving stuff. Okay? That's your warehouse. Imagine how much more efficiently you could do all of your work with that open space. So yes, I'm being literal. Create as much open floor space in your warehouse as you can. And then when you think you've done all you can, do 50% more. Oh, I've got a comment here. Here's a great idea. Tom, I'm usually slow during the summer, but I made financial agreements with a few contractors for a low monthly rate. They get something, I get something. I'm not exactly sure what this person is alluding to, but I've also seen some situations where some of my clients are prepaying freelancers for days. They're buying days. one, to help them out because they're in dire straits. And some of them are using their PPP money because these are W-2 workers, so they can pay them for stuff. I don't know whether it's legal to pay somebody for work later. I'll let somebody else sort that out. But if you can prepay for something now because you have the money and buy it for later and help somebody out, why wouldn't you do that? Awesome. Comment. So I need to be comfortable with part-time employees working with my competitors too? Yep. Unless you got full-time work for somebody, you can't really expect them to be exclusive. Again, this exists in so many other industries. Certainly in the film and TV production world, this is normal. Lots of the entertainment world, it's normal. I don't know how you can run an efficient, scalable business otherwise. Get big enough that you have full-time work, but you're still not going to need everybody working full-time for you. So, and what needs to change? What about business continuity? Because that gets staffed dynamically too. Steve, I'm going to have to ask you to clarify that question because I don't really get it. I know you're a smart guy. It's a good question. I'm just not seeing it. Another question, how do you run a warehouse with part-time people, but make sure you get people who know what they're doing? Excuse me, know what gear is called and required on a pull sheet. Yeah, you have to supervise them. You have to have transferable processes. You have to label things. Okay? Think you've exactly described what's going to happen. Now, you're not going to take somebody you've never known and never worked with before and hand them a pull list and cut them loose in your warehouse. It doesn't mean that the people aren't trained. Okay? It doesn't mean that they are not qualified for the thing that you're asking them to do. They're just not necessarily going to be there every single day doing it. So you need to make your systems as franchisable as possible, make it easy to transfer to other workers so that people can come in and pick up on that work. I do see, though I'm not a big fan of having staffing company people do my warehouse work. I do work with a lot of folks that is normal for them. And they have a regular crew of guys that they call in from their staffing company who work together with their team and help them prep and QC jobs. So it can be done, but it requires organization on your part. And you can't have a warehouse manager or operations manager who sits behind a computer all day. Okay? They have to be involved in supervising the work and supporting the work and making sure people don't get into trouble. So floor space is expensive in many markets. What are some good optimizing options if our company can't afford to add more floor space? Get rid of the junk you have. Most of the floor space you don't have is being wasted on things that are incredibly unimportant. I'm dead serious about this. Run a dumpster. Load up the back of your truck and take it to the dump. It's probably a lot less expensive if you've got that capacity. You have so much junk and obsolete equipment stored in your warehouse. It's unbelievable. Invest in taller shelves. Are your shelves as high as they can possibly be? You know, is your forklift the right forklift for your environment? There's so many ways that you can optimize space if you will let go of things that are just clogging it up. And if you don't know what to let go of, owners, if you don't know what to let go of, go out and ask your warehouse manager. She has a list. It's this long. Okay, throw the junk out. All that stuff you're storing for your second apartment or your vacation home that you closed down, it's got to go. Okay? Those 20-year-old video projectors you think are going to come back one day or you're keeping for parts, they got to go. Props that you use once a year, but you haven't used it for 5 years, they need to go. The list goes on and on. Get through that low-hanging fruit, and then let's talk again, because there's more you can do after that. Get down to the zero state for the business that you are going to be, not the business you were 2 years ago. All right. Are you assuming that all techs are W-2 employees? How to square with 1099 freelance market? No, I'm not assuming that all techs are W-2 employees. I will advise you to start thinking that way because it's coming. Um, as the gig economy really gears up and becomes more and more obvious, it's going to be more and more states are going to want to collect their unemployment taxes and insurance money, and so they need your employees to be W-2. They need your workers to be W-2. Right now, they're collecting unemployment, but they wouldn't have been able to collect unemployment without government intervention for this pandemic. So that's coming. So you can still use 1099 freelancers to whatever criteria you are comfortable with. Again, it's almost never my recommendation for you to have 1099 workers on any regular basis at all. So I don't see any difference between the two, and I don't treat them differently. I just might pay them differently. But even if somebody's a 1099 and they meet my criteria for 1099, I want to pay them as if they were W-2. If I pay W-2s every week, I want to pay my 1099s every week as well. How you treat your best freelancers, even more than before, is going to be how you are treating your best employees. They should be the same. And in the model that I'm talking about, in the future that we have in front of us, it's going to be absolutely vital that you embrace your part-time workers like family, because they're going to be, that's what you need to run your business. Let's see, how are we doing on time? All right, yeah, we're doing good. I try to make more time for questions, and I hope that's valuable to you. I'm sure you'll let me know if it's not. A lot of venues won't let us QC on site because they're going to set up for another event right after. How should we approach that situation? The fact that we're talking about 30 or 40 minutes. I mean, you can make the accommodation. So on a case-by-case basis. So it does come up sometimes, but just get out of their way. Same thing that you've always done. So worst comes to worst, you get the stuff on the truck and everybody goes back to the shop and finishes the work there. It's just a lot easier to do it in a nice open venue than it is back in your warehouse. What about the situation where you have a union crew and only 1 or 2 techs on site? It takes a particular skill here in New York City just to separate data from cable on and out. Yeah, there are some circumstances, crews, marketplaces where it's going to be a little bit more problematic. My recommendation with the unions that you work with is sit down with them, have an honest conversation. I need your guys to do more of this work. You're on a call. You're on an 8-hour minimum. Okay, here's the work we're going to do, and it requires supervision. Now, here's where you've got to change your mindset because they're going to take the work. Your mindset is you might have to send more supervision for the strike. Okay, you can't just rely on your 2 techs from the show crew to supervise the strike. You might have to send more crew in to help do that. So change the way that you're thinking. Let go of the old ways of doing things. Let go of the idea that a strike is self-contained with a show crew and some stagehands that show up. It might be an operational problem to go out and tear out a show, okay, and where the crew now works for you. So good question, but you have to change some mindsets to get your head around this. How do I stay in profitable 0 state when top techs want to white glove the show and not participate in the load in and load out? Okay, yeah. Well, if that's your labor pool, then you have to accommodate. If you want techs that white glove, and trust me, my generation of techs are pretty old. We can't be schlepping a lot of gear. We can't be lifting cases. So yeah, you're going to have some people who they can supervise though. Again, it's sitting down with them, having an honest conversation. So I need you to supervise. That's what I need. In the current state, I don't know why people wouldn't have that conversation. There are always exceptions to this. It's now an operational problem. Oh, I've got Ralph on the show. Ralph can't help with strike. He's really bad at supervising crews. We're better off if he just white gloves it and I don't have to pay him overtime to stand around, but we're gonna have to send somebody from the shop or from one of my other tech crews to come in and supervise and backfill. That's just what you do. Do whatever it takes to get the job done to operational standards. When the show is over, we're not on show anymore. We're now in operations world. Think of it that way. As soon as the audience walks out, we flip the switch. We're now in operations. We're out of show. Let's get our gear back. Let's get it QC. Let's get it back into the 0 state so we can all go home. A lot of what you're speaking about as far as operations seems to be focused more on keeping the warehouse and on-site setup being flexible and very part-time. Do you think this model could apply to the designer project manager portion of the business as well? Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, project managers are a direct cost, designs are a direct cost. There are circumstances where you need them for spec work, but that's a small portion of what they do. There's a huge advantage to treating them as an outside direct cost so that when you are doing spec work, there's a cost with no revenue. For instance, we want to bid on a large project. I need to contract a designer. The spec design fee is $1,500. I need to engage a project manager. The spec project management fee for a concept design is $750. These are hard costs that go against sales on your P&L. It would hit below the line in cost of sales, not cost of goods sold. Because it's an investment. It's a sales expense. It's a marketing expense. So they would go there. Now, you win the job, and now we're going to execute it. We're going to take the design, and we're going to turn it into a working drawings. Now that designer is direct cost. The project manager now becomes a direct cost. They're now above the line under cost of goods sold. They go against the job cost. Yeah, so the answer is yes. That's a good thing because it will help you manage the money better rather than putting them on staff and having them be a bottomless pit of resources where they're working 80 hours a week and not doing anything well because they're overhead and I'm already paying them. Is your normal removing full-time employees from the warehouse? Not all of them. You do need supervisors. You need, if you're running a 7-day-a-week operation that's regularly that busy, you need at least 2, maybe as many as 4. So it's not just removing full-time employees from the warehouse. How do you plan to make up for the loyalty towards your business? So the implication, I'm gonna finish reading the question because I'm reading too much into it. Isn't there a value in an employee that treats your business like it is their own because they are guaranteed a decent living and health benefits? Thank you, you made my point. You can guarantee a part-timer a decent living and health benefits. Okay, they are not mutually exclusive, right? You can treat people well. Okay? You can give them a home. You can treat them like family. You can give them limited access to benefits if that's what you want to do. You'd be surprised. Some of the most loyal people I've ever worked with in this industry were freelancers. And as an old freelancer, I kind of resent the implication that I'm not loyal to the people that I work with, when in fact I'm probably more loyal than some of their employees who tend to take having a job for granted and take the benefits of full employment for granted, whereas freelancers are only as good as their last job, and we're working really hard to make sure that there's going to be another job down the road, and often employees don't look at it that way. So again, this is a situation that is fairly normal for huge swaths of our industry, but it is new for some of the people that come from the AV side of the world, and we need to learn how to do it. Do you think the new normal will push show techs into be willing to come into the warehouse to prep? I hope not. I mean, generally, I don't want them to. So it's kind of a moot question. I prefer a model where techs are not the ones prepping their shows, but if you're a small business, you only have a handful of employees and a small labor pool, your techs are going to prep shows, particularly here at the beginning. When I hear show techs, I'm thinking about people who do shows for a living and have done so for years, much like I used to in an earlier life, where all we know is the ballroom. It's hard to get those guys to come in and help you prep your show unless they're on a day rate and unless it's their show and they're making sure that everything's going to go well and it's just part of what they do. So my goal is that we have show people and we have warehouse people, but in the interim, we need people who can cross over. But honestly, they're probably not the same people. All right. Okay, boy, we got lots of good questions here. Okay. Yeah, there used to be companies that purchased older or out-of-date AV gear. Unfortunately, that model kind of went away because that gear became worth so little that it wasn't practical to have those businesses. But if any of you knows companies like that and you want to post it in the chat, I'm sure folks would appreciate it. There was a great company that used to sell stuff on eBay. I thought was a really good model. There's some liquidation companies out there that you could certainly look into. But honestly, I think you're better off throwing most things out and giving yourself the emotional bandwidth to move on instead of making one more project that's never ever actually going to get done, which here's the pile of gear we're trying to sell as soon as we have time. Let's see. What if we are considered a non-essential business in our state and can't open the warehouse? Well, obviously you can't open the warehouse yet, right? It may be a week, it may be a month, it may be 6 weeks before you can do that, where there's a partial reopening of business. I don't know how that affects PPP, but of course the people who put it together didn't think about that. How did they? You may end up just paying people for sitting at home. But yeah, I think a lot of this makes a lot more sense when we can at least bring crews back to the warehouse working socially distant and following some protocols which have not been well defined for us yet. There's somebody else asking a similar question about if you're stuck at home, how do you recommend using our time for process improvements working from home? Same way you do shows. It's all planning. Plan it, map it out, put it on the schedule so that when it's time to start, everybody knows what to do. That's what you should be doing with your time. You're on webinars like this, you're thinking about stuff, you're coming up with plans. That's what you can be doing now. So if you're stuck at home, you can't get into your warehouse, that's no different than setting up a show, right? What do? We think about it, we obsess about it, we wake up in the middle of the night and put down something that we forgot to put on the show or in the show pull order, or something we forgot to put in the agenda, or a person we forgot to call. That's what you should be doing. Same thing you've always done, but treat your business like the show, and the day that you get back into the shop is load-in day. Thanks, that's a good question. I hadn't thought of it that way. Obsolete inventory, sell on eBay or other avenue, or trash? Yes, all of those things. Most of the stuff that you think you can sell is actually trash. All you have to do is get on eBay and don't look at what people are asking. Only look at things that were sold and what they sold for, and then make some decisions. I don't think you'll research very much on eBay before you come to the conclusion that that 15-year-old analog audio console that was so awesome when you bought it, nobody wants. Actually, I guess it'd have to be about a 20-year-old audio console. Sorry. God, time's going fast. What are your thoughts about negotiating freelance rates with vendors and freelancers? Well, yeah, of course you negotiate. But here's the thing. Part of what makes you a freelancer is you set your own rate. So I'm talking to both sides of here. As one old freelancer to another, if you're a freelancer, you set your rate. Say, this is what I do, this is what I do it for. Now, I'm a huge advocate of one rate, one person. Not I have a rate for this, a rate for this, a rate for this. I want my off-the-couch rate. You get 100% of my skills and talents and my toolkit, okay, for this rate. And I don't care if you have me running, running house lights or engineering an E2 system, my rate is the same. That's how I approach freelancing. For you, I want you to talk to freelancers like, okay, I have more work for you at this price than the price that you're asking. Do you want me to offer you that other work or only offer you work at the price that you're asking? That's negotiating when you're working with freelancers. Okay? For W-2 workers who might technically be a freelancer, what you're really saying is, I have work for camera ops. You're a qualified camera op. This is the rate I pay camera ops. Take it or leave it, but you are W-2. Okay? So you don't have to negotiate. You simply have to say that this is the work that I have. But be realistic. This is not who you want to beat up, right? There are other suppliers that you could beat up a little bit harder than the people who are customer facing in your business, who are probably your biggest advocates and could easily be your biggest detractors if you treat them poorly. Okay. So my quote, why hold on to obsolete inventory? Comment is, if the kit has any value, nobody is buying at the moment. You're right, throw it away. Is it best to tuck it away somewhere and sell it when the market has recovered a little? Probably not. If it's not worth anything now, it's not going to suddenly become more valuable later. I mean, anything that you're not using is probably junk. So it's junk to everyone else. And by the time people are buying that, the other people are selling it have dropped their price. So if it's not worth anything now, I've never in my years seen a piece of our technology or equipment that increased in value over time. Yeah, so the answer to that is chuck it. And then somebody's going to give me the exception to the rule, the thing that happened to them one time, save it. Okay? Exceptions just prove the point. How might we approach work coming in before shelter in place is lifted? We have a client who'd like us to perform a job out of our home state. They're open, we're not. Well, only if your state has a travel restriction for getting in and out, that's problematic. If this particular person happens to be from California, and I believe they are, that is problematic. I know in Texas that we have basically a quarantine between certain states, California, Southern Florida, where you actually have to sign paperwork and go on 14 days of quarantine and to come into Texas. So it becomes problematic. However, that's not to say that we can't figure out a way to do the business. So I think more and more this is going to become less of an issue in the weeks to come. If you got a job next week, I'm sure you'll use your best judgment. But we're talking 2 or 3 months out from now. I think by then there's going to be plenty of viable answers to that. Yeah, dump, recycle, sell, or donate. Yeah, amen. What should we do with all the road cases? Trash the road cases. If you can't recycle or reuse that road case, repurpose it, boy, take them to the crusher. Get them out of there. They're making you look bad. Nothing makes you look worse than a crappy road case. So get rid of those things. And no, there's nobody wants them. Again, they are hard to get rid of for anything that's worth the time and trouble to get rid of. Okay, Tom, you've talked about, okay, this is the last question. You've talked about adjusting labor rates for both freelancers and staff techs, but do you think that union labor rates will also be adjusted? I can't speak for the unions. In general, I find their rates are market rates. Their rules are market rules. Matter of fact, most of the standards and best practices we have about labor billing, timing, meal penalties, work days and everything came from unions. We have a 40-hour work week because of unions. So I think they are kind of the benchmark. And if you learn to understand why they do what they do and adapt to that, you'll find that you'll fit in better with the rest of the industry and all of that. So as for their rates, the rates that they pay their workers, which are your workers, are probably not going to go down. But what you may get is some flexibility on rules and application on things like double time and stuff on Sundays or holidays and things like that. I think we'll see a little bit more flexibility of that. As an old show guy and TD production manager, I don't want to negotiate directly with a union office. I prefer to go through a third-party provider that has a better relationship with them, that acts as a broker for that. And I don't mind paying the extra fee to have a happy, well-managed union crew, but that's just my personal approach. All right. There are more questions. I'll scan them. If there's any hot ones, I'll bring them up next week. But thank you for this. I hope you guys appreciated having a little bit more Q&A time. I'll try and engineer that in. Again, 90 minutes is about all I can take of this, but it is a lot of fun, and I do appreciate being able to do this with you and for you. So we'll keep it going, shall we? So again, next week we'll talk about strategy. I'll have the recording up here in the next hour or so. Be well, be safe, take care of yourselves, give yourself a break. None of us have been through this before. but let's keep on trying, shall we? All right, talk to you next week. Cheers.